promises to be a real treat. Dr. Venkateshan is currently the head of the Center for European Studies. She's the former head of the Department of French, both at the University of Mumbai. She has had a fairly prodigious sort of academic career with lots of publications, but she has forbidden me from listing out all her accomplishments because we have given her just 45 minutes for the lecture and she doesn't want her introduction to eat into that time. However, as head of the Center for Dharma Studies and her host, I do want to take a few liberties here. And I want to share that Dr. Vidya Venkateshan has her PhD from Sorbonne, and she did it in comparative literature, comparing Valmiki's Ramayana to a French epic, the name of which I shall not hazard the pronunciation. She can explain it later. You can ask her about it. But in terms of her subsequent work, it is something that all of us really should emulate in terms of the kind of visiting professorships. She had the Erasmus Mundus fellowship, Vidya?
You're called a visiting scholar.
Visiting
professor,
scholar.
visiting faculty.
Basically, over one summer, she could choose 3 different universities in Europe to teach from. And I remember that was the year there was the economic collapse and Greece really had it bad. So her stint in Greece had to be called short. You know, these are very exciting journeys which she has made in her academic career. And along with this is her interest in everything from dance and music and poetry. She has translated Javed Akhtar's poems into French. That's not an easy task at all. She's also currently translating, or in the works is a text which is from Creole. Am I right, Vidya? Into English.
The French Caribbean. It's a mixture of text and French, and they call it Creolized French.
Right, and she makes for a wonderful teacher, as all of her students testify. Vidya manages to make her classes so full of fun, so full of life, and she brings a sort of passion to her subject, which, you know, she's really blessed, and all of us are blessed to have her as a friend, as a guide, as a mentor. And without taking up too much time this evening, Vidya, it's over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for inviting me, Supriya. Thank you, all of you, for being present. In Tamil, we say that, do you have to be paid to eat sugarcane? Is it not rewarding in itself? I had the good fortune of sharing with you today a few thoughts on the Ramayana. I must tell you at the very outset, I am no scholar of the subject. I was not trained in Sanskrit. All I do is go back to the original text. I either work directly with the original text, and if possible, I try to work with a scholar who is willing to take all my questions, and they're quite unending, and we take up a given text, we go to the original, and we just dig into it. It usually turns out to be a very, very interesting experience, very tiring, especially for the other person, but that's how I like to work. So today we're going to talk about only the Ram Sita wedding, just one episode in the Ramayanas. We're going to look at 4 Ramayanas. We look at Valmiki, which is the Ur text. I don't like to say the original because it means like the others are copies. I don't think they are. I think they're all independent creations. But yes, Valmiki was the first one who seems to have collated this story, because again, I don't believe that one day he sat down at his writing desk and just started off, I think these must have been stories that were circulating, that bards sang and people sang after him. And then somebody came along and put it all together, collated it, and it became an epic. So today we're going to talk about the Valmiki Ramayana in Sanskrit. We're going to talk about Kamban in Tamil, Kambanattalvar as he was called. Then you have the Kritibashri Ramayana, one of the Bengali Ramayanas. And then we'll be talking about Goswami Tulsidasa's Ramcharitmanas. So my time starts now, and I will be done in 45 minutes. If at any point you feel, I've said enough, could we go ahead? If you message Soups, I'm not going to be looking at the chat because it distracts me. We can cut short and go ahead. I would spend a little bit more time on the Tamil, on the Sanskrit, and then on the Tamil, because these two are very different from each other. And the Tamil Ramayana is the first Bhakti Kavya. The others are very much in the Bhakti mode, though each poet, Kritibash, does something else to his Ram Sita wedding. And you have Goswami Tulsidas, who imagines it quite differently. So thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the Ramayana, which is as dear to you as me. And the beauty of the Ramayana tradition is that it is plural. You have, according to A.K. Ramanujan, one of the greatest folklorists who ever lived, there are no less than 300 recorded Ramayanas. I underline recorded, because there are so many unrecorded Ramayanas that we're not even getting into those details. So of these 300 Ramayanas, we're only going to choose 4. And the whole idea of the plurality of the Ramayana tradition is that it is so in keeping with the spirit of India. We have many religions, we have many languages, so we have many Ramayanas. And today we're going to go to 4 weddings. And in the process, we will see that there is no original and copy. There are just new retellings. And as they say, as long as there will be the earth, there will be new retellings of the Ramayana. So let's begin with the Valmiki Ramayana. I'm not approaching this as anything but a literary text. It's a literary text. It's a piece of, it's a social document in terms of the Bhakti movement. I'm not looking at it as history. I'm not looking at it as a religious text. So let me begin first with 2 stories. The Ramayana itself is the Adi Kavya, so I can hardly begin today without these 2 stories. So in the Vishnupuri version of the Ramayana, Hanuman is flying over the sea, carrying the signet ring, and it falls into the sea. Hanuman promptly dives in, and he dives really deep because he has to reach the seabed. That's where the ring must have settled. And when he's there, he sees that the place is strewn with signet rings, and there's one gentleman sitting in a corner performing penance. He asks him, "Excuse me, I've come to look for Rama's ring. You know who I am? I'm Hanuman. You know who that is?" And the Tapasvi looks at him totally indifferent, and he says, "How many Ramas? How many Ramayanas? How many Hanumans? There are so many rings. Choose what is yours and go on, man." And Hanuman looks for his ring, finds it, and he goes on. One story. Story 2, remember that scene where Rama goes to tell Sita that, I'm off to the forest, you stay here and serve my mother for 14 years and I will come back. This folk Sita tries all the arguments that the other Sitas do. I'm supposed to be your shadow. I cannot live without you. How can I live in a palace when you're... And when Rama seems quite decided about it, she tells him, if all the other Sitas and all the other Ramayanas could go with their Ramas, why should I not go with you? Ram doesn't have an answer and he takes her along. So this is to tell you how there are multiple traditions of the Ramayanas, but each one is more beautiful than the other. To call one the original and the other one the copy, or one the original, the other one the translation, is actually not very fair. So let's begin with the Valmiki. So in the Valmiki, if you remember, we have, after the Ahalya is revived, you have Ram, you have Ram, Lakshman, and Vishnu head towards Mithila, where they have been told that there is this Shiva Dhanush which is to be broken. They are going to go there, and Janaka is asked by Vishwamitra, can these young men see the bow? And right then we find that Janaka is going to spend a great deal of time to talk about the Daksha sacrifice, the Shivadhanush. And here Sita is just mentioned once as a foundling from the furrow, as she is known as. And here Janaka announces that he will give her in marriage to the man who will win her as a prize of valor, Virya Shulka. And he says, many kings have come and gone, but nobody passed the test. They even besieged Lanka, but I routed them away with the help of the gods. And he comes up with a formal proposal. He says, if Rama is able to string the bow, then I will give him my daughter Sita in marriage. Now, again, we get into a whole long passage about this Shivadhanush. It is huge. It's mounted on 8 wheels. 5,000 well-built men bring it along. And a very solemn introduction to the bow is made by Vishwamitra to Ram. Ram opens the chest in which there is the bow. He strings it effortlessly. He even breaks it like a crash of thunder. The earth seemed to quake. The mountains split in two. All the men in the assembly topple over except Ram, Lakshman, and Vishwamitra, of course, and Janaka, the quadrant. Joyous Janaka declares that Sita has brought great honor to his lineage. In securing Rama as a husband, my pledge is now redeemed. I shall give Sita away. Dashratha is invited on the eve of the ceremony, and it is decided that all the 4 Ikshvakus will be married off to the 4 sisters, Sita and Urmila, who are daughters of Janaka, and his brother's daughters, who are Mandavi and Shrutakirti, will be married off at the same pandal. All the family priests are invited, the families are discussed, genealogies are recounted, and then you have the Samavartana ceremony, which marks the end of the Brahmacharya Ashrama, which is performed for the 4 boys. Very interestingly, Yudhajit, or Kaikeyi's brother, is present at the wedding. Nobody else is. And this is followed by the Nandi Shraddha. The 4 young men are attired as grooms. And now, once again, you have a lengthy description of the altar, where the wedding is going to be performed. We are told there are golden plates and jars of different colors containing grains, shallow earthen cups full of sprouts. There are vessels containing incense sticks, large conches, specific wooden ladles. They even have different names. They are sruks if they are of a larger size, and sruvas if they are of a smaller size. Vessels brimming with water, vessels full of parched grain, akshata, and so on. There's darba grass strewn everywhere. Sita appears for the first time. She's beautifully attired. The poet calls her Sarvalankara Bhushita, and Janaka gives her away. Now we are all familiar with this verse. Iyam Sita mama sutta saha dharmacharitavam. So this is how she's given away. And this is my daughter, Sita by name. She will be your companion in the path of righteousness or dharma. Please take her hand and accept her as your own. May good betide you. She's highly fortunate and will remain exclusively devoted to you. She will follow you forever, faithful and inseparable as your shadow. The Hindu fathers all over the world marry off their daughters, repeating the lines that Janaka himself did. The daughters are married, and Vishwamitra proceeds to the Himalayas. Dashratha wants to return to Ayodhya. Janaka gives a large dowry, but as soon as they set off, there are bad omens, and lo behold, it's Parashurama. When Parashurama appears, he's obviously, by definition, angry. The rishis greet him ceremoniously, and Parashurama tells Rama that I heard you broke this bow, but I'll give you another one. That was a Shivadhanush. Let me give you the Vishnudhanush. Now I challenge you to a combat. Once again, Dasharatha panics and he says he cannot bear to be separated from his son. That is, he's imagined right from the beginning that Rama is going to lose this battle, and Parshurama doesn't even look at him. And he explains that Vishwakarma manufactured two bows, the Shivadhanush and the Vishnudhanush. Once Brahma had sowed the seeds of discord between them, that is Shiva and Vishnu, an epic battle ensued. Shiva's bow cracked and the very gods intervened to stop this fight. The Shiva Dhanush went to the Janaka family and the Vishnu Dhanush went to the Parashurama's family. Rama takes up the challenge and says, I'm capable of this fight. I'm a true-blooded Kshatriya, but who or what shall I aim my arrow at? Because no arrow of mine will be in vain. You are a Brahmin, he says to Parashurama. You cannot kill you. Pray, what can my arrow claim from you? Parashurama stares at Rama, sucked of all energy, weakened. Remember, it's the end of one avatara and the beginning of another one. He admits defeat. Since I gave away the very earth that I have conquered through my penance to my guru, Kashyapa, I accepted his condition that I cannot spend a single night on earth. Please aim your arrow at the three worlds that I have won through my austerities, so that I may go back to Mount Mahendra and start my tapasya all over again. Rama obliges, hands over the Vishnu Dhanush to Varuna for safekeeping, returns with his family to Ayodhya. The queens welcome the young brides home and they live happily for many years. So now I described the passage as it is in the Valmiki Ramayana. Now let's have a quick analysis of the same. Valmiki Ramayana is an epic poem, a song of action that tells the story of a brave heart. Valmiki's Rama kills demons, breaks one bow after another, builds bridges. He also weds Sita. He's a man of action and daring deeds, not a creature of feeling or emotion. Not that he's insensitive. The basic virile emotions are familiar to him. He's angry with the Rakshasas. He grieves for his father. He empathizes with Sugriva. He's compassionate towards the downtrodden. But the more complex and subtle Ekadama, as it were, nuances, the intricacies of Shringara or Eros escape. Is his prize of valor, his virya medal, a decoration, something he won. It could be Sita or any other princess. Sita is given by her father and taken by Rama. It is an arranged marriage. The bride and the groom meet at the altar, decorated for the wedding. Nobody asked them for their consent. It is the coming together of two well-matched families and heartily approved of by the Kulagurus or the family priest heads. The main focus of the wedding is the bow, the Shivadhanush, whose glories are extolled at every available opportunity and whose story, or should I say history, is told and retold. Similarly, the sacrificial altar is of great importance. The bride and the groom are summarily alluded to. No festivity is mentioned, and there is not even a passing reference to the wedding banquet. Janaka offers Sita to Rama, who is being brought by Vishwamitra. Dashratha comes with 3 more sons, and Kushadwaja and Janaka give away their daughters, objects of exchange, given and received with alacrity. The queens of both households are curiously absent, and the uncle, the maternal uncle, namely Yudhajit, Kaikeyi's brother, is present. Let us now skip a millennium to meet Kambana Talwar of the rich Tamil country. He wrote the Rama story in 12,116 verses and called it Ramavataram. Now, as you can guess from the title, it's a Ramavataram, so it's necessarily the Avatara principle. Therefore, it is a Bhakti Kavya. he lives during the time of the Cholas, and he's compared by scholars to Dante and what Dante did for medieval Christianity. He describes the Ramasita wedding in 14 padalams or chapters, and Kamban really sets the mood. With great, there seems to be a lot of time, effort, and talent that goes into setting the wedding mood. There's a whole ambiance he creates. So initially we start entering Mithila, and he immediately tells you that Mithila is a Bhoga Nagara, whereas Ayodhya was a Yoga Nagara. So everything here is pleasing to the senses. Mithila has broad roads, tall mansions, fluttering flags, and the poet further clarifies that this place is also so beautiful because Mahalakshmi herself lives here. And very quickly we meet Sita, and this is how he describes her in the Balakanda. She has the luminosity of gold. She smells like sweet flowers. She is honey sipped by the bees from the most beautiful of flowers. She tastes like good poetry, which combines both form and content. She is standing in the Kannimada, or a balcony that is reserved for young unmarried girls. She looked like a regal swan surrounded by her friends. Rama and Lakshmana notice her. Rama looks up. And that moment is again a very magical moment, a coup de foudre, as the French would call it. It's love at first sight. And the poet goes into raptures when he discusses this magical moment. He says they almost eat each other up. They swallow each other up. They fuse into each other. He says they entered each other's hearts through their eyes, and their very beings merged together. One shared glance was enough to bind their hearts with ropes of love for eternity. Thus, they came to stay in each other's arms, became in each other's hearts, became part and parcel of each other. And here he says, in a very beautiful reference, he says two people who both lived on the Milky Ocean, the Ksheerasagara, they had been separated by an avatara. And when in a flash, those two separated lovers came together, speech was irrelevant. So they never spoke to each other. They just looked at each other. And then Rama moves on, but then Sita becomes the proverbial love-struck maiden. And again, another beautiful metaphor he uses. He says, just like a drop of buttermilk can curdle the very nature of an entire pot of milk and turn it into something else, so also the love that was inspired by the sight of Rama that transformed Sita deeply, completely from within. And then you see the very strong influence of Sangam literature, which is really something that Kamban is very familiar with. You must remember that Sangam literature is much, much older than the Ramayana itself. And there are the Kamba Ramayana itself. And therefore, this Sangam literature has drawn profiles of the love-struck maiden, her various states of mind and so on. And so you have Kamban Sita, who becomes a typical Viraha heroine. He says she's like a creeper that has been singed. She breathes hot sighs, which make the beads on her brows evaporate. The moonbeam sets her on fire. The silk thread of her garments snap. Her companions get into a tizzy. They feel she has been a victim of the evil eye. And Sita herself is in a quandary. She knows she's in love, but she doesn't know who the person is. And she's thinking to herself, he's not Cupid, he's not Manmatha, because he didn't carry a flower bow. Could he be a celestial being? But he did bat his eyelashes, so he was a man. And she tends to relive this moment, remembering him part by part. And she knows one thing for sure. She says, my heart would not go to the wrong man. So he must be unmarried. He must be a Kshatriya. That is why I'm in this state. Then Rama continues his journey. Then in the evening, however, when Vishwamitra has gone to sleep and he's alone by himself, Rama then becomes the love-struck hero. And he remembers her not just with his eyes, but with his heart. And again, he is sure that she must be the right girl, of the right family, of the right background, and unmarried. Otherwise, his heart would not go to her with such alacrity. And at that time, we have the scene where he's going to be. We go into the room where the bow is kept. Janaka invites them. The rest of it is the same. But when this bow is brought out, we have the reactions of people, who see the bow and who see this young man. And, someone says, this Muni, in his old age, he brings a young child in front of such a heavy bow. What's happening? Somebody else says, he's such a small child. How is he going to do this? Yet others say, maybe Janaka doesn't want to get his daughter married. Otherwise, why would he do this? But Rama lifts this bow, and once again, Kamban says, as if it were a garland that Sita held out to him. Kamban does not describe the act of breaking of the bow because it all happened in a split second. Some people saw him lift it, others heard a thundering crash that resounded in the three worlds. It resounded so loudly that Dasharatha heard it in Ayodhya. Parashurama heard it on Mount Meru. But Sita could not hear it because she was so lost in her thoughts. And there is much joy and celebration. And here again, you have a very, very special touch, which is introduced by Kamban. He imagines a character, and it's a very unique creation. He imagines a character called Neelamale. She is Sita's youngest Sakhi, and she has been dispatched from the palace by Sita and her friends to go and find out what's happening because they're not present when this happens. And Neelamale has just witnessed the event. She's delighted. She's thrilled. And, she's also very proud. She's been chosen to convey the happy tidings. So the poor girl forgets all protocol. She rushes back to Sita. But as a Sakhi, she's not supposed to enter without permission. She didn't, and the poet says, I quote, she did not bow. She entered noisily. Joy was bubbling within her. She sang, she danced. It was only when the others asked her to speak up did she wake up from her trance, regain her composure, and convey the happy tidings. Neelamale is but a fleeting moment of glory. She's a small sample of Kamban's style of miniature painting. Sita is thrilled, but in her mind, she still has a doubt. She hasn't seen the person. Messengers are dispatched, and Dasharatha sets out. I must make a mention here that the invite you received was lovingly designed by Supriya. It has a picture of, it is a miniature of Dasharatha coming to the wedding. And like I was telling her, I have never had a lecture where the invitation was so beautifully and lovingly designed. So this is that particular scene that your invitation conveys, that Dasharatha came. And with him came the people of Ayodhya. And mind you, the poet is very sensitive once again. Normally, when there's so many people, there's so much of a crowd, we say there is not a place for a grain of sesame to fall. Til dharne ko jaga nahi hai. But this is a wedding, you see, and till being associated with aparakarya or death ceremonies, the poet says, let me use the urad dal. Urad dal dharne ko jaga nahi thi. There was not a place for a gram of urad to fall. Once again, the whole art of preparation, because this route fair to this Bharat, which is set out from Ayodhya, is going to cross a whole lot of landscapes, country, and obviously in the Bharat, there are many young lovers and some mature lovers, from brand new lovers, some are going to fall in love. So you see the Shringara Rasa is continued. Shringara just doesn't happen to Rama or doesn't convey the, just at the wedding, switch on the button and Eros happens. No, it's built up. It's a mood, it's an ambiance, it's a gentle color, it's a sweet scent. And so you have lovely, little cameos where, there are lovers' spats, then there's mock anger, then there is all the making up. And all these are, frankly, in an epic, they're irrelevant people for anybody else. But for Kamban, they're important. And I'll give you just one scene. where there are a young pair deeply in love, but they've had a spat. And in spite of the man's pleading, the woman refuses to talk to him or look at him or whatever. So disappointed, he goes away. And Kamban says, but in her heart, she felt very sorry, but was too proud to admit it. So what does she do? She takes her pet parrot and she sets it off in the direction that the man is going. And she runs after her pet parrot. And when he turns back, she says, I didn't come for you. I came to look for my birdie. So, like I said, this whole ambiance of the Shringara. So there are little comical interludes also, tableaus of union. And finally, the wedding party reaches Ayodhya. And once more, this is the name of the poet is Kamban, true, but he's called Kambanat Alvar. He's an Alvar. He's a devotee. You have the Vaishnavism, which has Alvars, and there is this whole theme of personal devotion. So Kambanat Alvar is going to take great pleasure to dress up his Ishtadevata, who's Rama, to gaze upon him, the importance of darshana, and he's going to savor Rama's beauty. He's going to enjoy this wedding. And the poem he writes invites us as readers to share this love, to share this joy. So he says that when the party reached Ayodhya, people rushed to see everybody. And when they saw Rama, they just feasted their eyes upon him. But what happened was there was a problem. Every part of Rama was so beautiful that whoever looked at that part of him stared there and sat there. They just didn't move on to the rest of his body. So the poet says, those who looked at his shoulders just kept looking there. And those who looked at his feet couldn't take their eyes away either. So actually nobody saw Rama in his entirety. And there's a very beautiful sequence where there's a person who's, trying to catch a glimpse and obviously not very tall. So between the waists of women and the interstitial spaces, she sort of sees whether she can get a glimpse of Rama. Now we have a description of Sita. And once again, it's the joy of an Alvar. He says how, the elaborate hairdo, the ornaments, then makeup. Makeup is a very fine art by the time you have the Kamba Ramayana. So you have, glittering gel that is being put on Sita's face. There's a very elaborate hairdo. Then the poet says, after all this description of the various pieces of jewelry, items of makeup, the coiffure, he says that, all this jewelry detracts from Sita's beauty. And what is the simile, he says? He says, just like the beauty of the eye is taken away by the eyelid because it shuts and opens, similarly, Sita's beauty all these various ornaments she wore detracted from it. Because he says, can nectar be sweetened? Can light be made more luminous? They just were putting this on her for nothing. A very interesting detail. And that's the scene, he's very good with his cameos. So he says that they have, now they put various ornaments on her and they don't know what to do with the kamarband, the odyanam, the kamarpatta, because they don't know where to hang this ornament, because Sita has such a slim waist. It's as if she didn't have a waist. So people are very confused where to hang this kamarpatta or this odyanam. And some people say she doesn't have a waist, yaar, kahan lagaoge? And others say, of course not, every human being has a waist. And so the poet says, this discussion is the discussion between people in the world. Some say God exists, others say he doesn't. I think I should switch on the light. Yeah, this might be, is this better? And then you have a description of her hairdo and her makeup and how she smells like sweet flowers. So obviously scent was in fashion, perfumes were used, and she enters the hall. And there again, you have a very, very beautiful description of how she entered. I won't get into those details because we'll run short of time for the others. And Rama looks at her, wondering if it's the same girl he saw in the balcony. And here again, Vishwamitra's reaction is very interesting. He says, when he looks at Sita, he says, for this maiden, what is a mere bow? Rama would have cleaved 7 mountains. So clearly Vishwamitra appreciates beauty. Sita tries to catch a glimpse of Rama by rearranging her bangles. She can't look up at him straight, so she looks at her bangles, and in that gold, in that pearls, Rama's face is reflected, and so she gets a glimpse of him, and she says, "Yeah, sure, this is the same guy." And then you have some very specific rituals that are mentioned, which are typical of a Tamil wedding. So there is the Panigrahana, there is the sighting of the Arundhati star. There is no Mangal Sutra mentioned. The Parashurama episode is fairly banal. But what I would like to say as a little bit of an analysis is that the Rama of Ramavataram is not an epic hero alone. His strong arms don't take away from his tender heart. He falls in love with Sita, pines for her, hopes and prays to marry the princess he has fallen in love with. His skill at archery is a given. His courage and valor have already been proven earlier. This wedding is a chance to feast our eyes on his beauty. Kamban lovingly dresses him up, makes him wear the choicest of ornaments, and simply lets us fill our hearts and minds with this vision of beauty. Sita is a Sangam heroine. Premarital love is not forbidden for her. Her love for Rama is a silent one, but their eyes speak volumes. Valmiki's Sita is a mere foundling in the furrow who comes alive after her marriage to Rama. It is the extraordinary bow and not Sita's beauty that inspire reams of poetry for Valmiki. But for Kamban, Cupid dipped his brush in sweet nectar to paint Sita. The wedding that Kamban describes is a Tamil one, Panigrahana, Kanyadana, Saptapadi, and so on. There is somehow minimum emphasis on ritual and maximum emphasis on this beautiful sight, this darshana that we get. And it is also significant because this is going to be the happiest moment in the epic. And it's after March, maybe 7 kandas that we are going to come to after many more kandas, that we are going to come to the Pattabhisheka, where there will be another semblance of revelry. Because now onwards, once the epic starts flowing again, there is no chance for celebration like this. Now we go to West Bengal. We go to a place called Phulea in Nadia district. You have a very learned Pandit here by the name of Krittivash, and he writes his Ramayana, which is actually called Krittivashir Ramayan. So it doesn't have any other name. He called it Ramayan, but it is Krittivashir. It belongs to Krittivash. And it's full of local color, flavor, and it's very, very Bengali, as you will see. The first book is called the Adikanda, and it is in this book that they do get married. And so I invite you to this wedding that happened that was imagined 500 years ago. So when they come in, so again, you have Vishwamitra who leads the young men into Mithila, and Sita sees him from her balcony, and she asks her friend, who are these 2 gentlemen? And her friend says, the one who's like the rain cloud, he's Rama. And now Sita's worried. She says, oh my God, my father has said that he has to break the bow. Rama is so slender, the bow is huge, and my father will only give me in marriage to the one who gives this bow, who breaks this bow. So anyway, all that happens. She prays to the gods, the bow is broken. Ram says, you call for my father, unless he permits me, I won't get married. I will get married only with my brothers. And poor Vishwamitra says, don't worry, I'll go back, I'll convey the news. But here again, look at the little touch, because when he goes back, you have people of Ayodhya saw Vishwamitra go with the two young princes into a deep forest in order to fight the demons. And when he comes back alone after so many years, you can imagine the state of mind of people. And so there's wailing, there's crying, the queens come out rushing because they think something has happened to the children. Their children who had gone with the sage are not coming back with him. So something must have happened. So, Vishwamitra has to say, please relax. There's no problem. Your sons are getting married. Please come with me. And then again, there is a very homely touch, because immediately Kaushalya says, please get the holud ready. Holud is the for the haldi ceremony, and she says, I need to get the haldi ready. So, the mother who gets involved with the preparations, and then they set out. So when they set out, I must tell you that in the Bengali Ramayana and also in Tulsi, but less in Tulsi, one of the main activities is food. Okay, so there is the pre-wedding banquet and there is the wedding banquet. So when he says that as soon as they reached Ayodhya, as soon as they reached Mithila, there were shamyanas, and the poet says there were lakes of ghee and milk and mountains of rice and dessert. The entire place was covered, entire earth was covered with food. Hundreds and thousands of casseroles and ladles could be heard everywhere because, the halwais were doing the needful. And everybody was, warmly inviting the party to eat. And you could hear, please eat well, have a little more. Please, have you been fed properly? So Janaka himself welcomes the groom's party. They have chosen an auspicious time for the wedding. The two Kulagurus have sat together. And now here, there is a problem, because if Sita and Rama are married at the right time, the time has been chosen so that they spend the next 7 lives together. But that's not the divine plan, right? They have to be separated. Otherwise, how do you get rid of Ravana? So the gods hatch a plan. And what do? They tell Chandra to go and dance in the wedding hall, exactly at the time of the Muhurat. So when Chandra will start dancing, the Muhurat will be skipped. Obviously, the wedding won't be cancelled, but they will be married at the wrong time, and therefore they'll be separated, and therefore Ravana will be killed, and so on. So this party, the wedding party, reaches, and apparently there were so many people that Krittibash says that there was a lot of pushing and pulling, and thoda bahut gali galoch. So he says there was a lot of thela theli, that means pushing and shoving, and gala gali, that means some insults and some harsh words. They all finally get into the hall, and just when Shatananda from the side of Janaka and Vasishtha from the Ayodhya side says, "Chalo chalo, Muhurat ka time ho raha hai, get ready," Chandra comes and starts dancing. Nobody knows where he came from. Nobody knows who he is, but he's so mesmerizing that everybody stops to watch him dance. The Muhurat slips away, and then the dancer moves away, and everybody says, okay, shadi karao. And they get married at the wrong time. You see, every Ramayana that's subsequent to the Adi Kavya is going to answer or try to answer or give an explanation about some questions that must have plagued the minds of readers who read the story. People must have asked themselves, bhai, itne pyar se to shadi rachaya tha. They must have looked at they must have looked at the right Muhurat, and these two must have had wonderful horoscopes if they were gods personified. Why then did it go wrong? So here you have an interesting episode imagined by the Bengali poet who says, this is the reason why they were separated. If they had been married at the right Muhurat, this wouldn't have happened. Muhurat nikal gayi aur shadi mein ye gadbad ho gayi maan. Okay, then you have Sita, who's dressed as the traditional bride. She comes with a betel leaf, which she's going to hold against her face. She has beautiful designs on her eyebrows and her forehead. Like any other Bengali bride, Ram and his brothers wear the traditional tupur with pearl strings hanging. They come in palanquins. And after the marriage, Sita Sita begins to wear conch bangles like all Bengali brides do. And then you have the interesting icebreakers that are imagined for the couple. So they put Sita, the marriage is over. Now they're going to put Sita away in a dark room. And they tell Rama, well, go and fetch her. Now, Sita is afraid that Ram, when he's looking for her in a dark room, may not find her. And if he touches her feet, it would be wrong. So she, she makes a noise with her bangles and her anklets. So Rama knows that, this is where she is. And when she shakes her anklets, he avoids her leg and he holds her hand where she has the kangan. And then some of the girls, the Sakhis, make fun of Rama. They tell him, you're so dark. Look at our Janaki, she's so fair. And Rama says, don't worry. In the company of such a beautiful woman, maybe I will improve my looks too. And, then the wedding is over. There's been a grand feast. The wedding feast includes 50 side dishes. And also has, among other desserts, has shondish. And finally, everybody is offered pan with kapur, with camphor in it. And there is a very tender bidai ceremony where Janaka takes Sita on his lap. He covers her with sweet kisses and he tells her, be a good wife, be a good daughter-in-law. Sita's friends cry and hug her. And just as when the party is on the way out, you have the Parashurama episode. And here you get a glimpse of Lakshmana, who's a bit of an angry young man. And he answers impertinently. And once again, Vishwamitra, the Parashurama is very angry. He doesn't appreciate the impertinent comments that are made by Lakshmana. But that is not developed in great detail. What happens is that Rama says, okay, give me the bow. I'll string that one too. So give me the Vishnu Dhanush. At that time, Sita's reaction is interesting. Kritiparsh says Sita was worried. She says, he broke one bow and won my hand. Now, if he strings another bow, is he going to take a second wife? Anyway, that's a little detail. And then Parashurama challenges Rama. Rama wins the battle. And then they reach Ayodhya. And, all is well. So here again, if we look at the Bengali Ramayana, we have a very comely, tender Bengali wedding. It could be your family, it could be mine. There is none of the solemnity or associated with the Valmiki. There is none of the grandeur, the epic grandeur of Kamban. This is a very homely, tender family wedding. It is stripped of its epic austerity. It is a cozy wedding. It is replete with tenderness, with humor. Those of us who are familiar with Bengali weddings will agree that Bengali weddings are really full of fun and frolic. Sumptuous banquets are at the very heart of these weddings. Rama is a typical Bengali groom. Sita is a typical Bengali beau. And the ceremonies like Holud, Bidai find a place of importance. The chaos and the confusion that make a wedding memorable are very, very lovingly described. And also the explanation as to why this couple was separated. Now we have 5 minutes more. Supriya, can I take 5 more minutes? Okay, you're stuck with me. So now we move to Tulsidas. Tulsidas is going to tell his Ramayana in 10,000 verses. They are chaupais. And at this wedding, what is very interesting is again the beautiful scene, but this time it's far more elaborate, when Ram and Sita meet before the wedding. You see, we are all familiar with this scene actually, and it has been sort of treated in various dance episodes and so on, but we don't know that it's Tulsi who imagines it. And here you have, just imagine the setting, you have a beautiful garden, and Sita has gone to perform Gauri Puja. And Ram and Lakshman have come to pluck flowers for their Guru's Sandhya Puja. And one of the Sakhis spot this princely duo. They rush back to Sita to tell her that the two very handsome young men in the garden, all these girls rush there. And when Rama first hears Sita's bangle, girdle and anklets ring, he thinks it's Cupid's kettle drum, Manmatha's kettle drum. He stares unabashedly and even forgets to blink. Here, Tulsidas gives us a very sweet detail. He says Janaka's ancestor, Nimi, had been given a boon. He would live on people's eyelids forever. Now, the first person, therefore, to witness this coup de foudre, this love at first sight between Ram and Sita, was Nimi. Now, being the ancestor, he was quite embarrassed to be a person like this, and he is said to have slipped away very gently. Normally, Nimi never leaves your eyelids. Ram is speechless in wonder. The lady lends beauty to beauty itself. Can the creator have exhausted all his imagination, making this one masterpiece? He asks. And while he's looking at Sita like this, Sita is peeking at him from behind a fence of creepers. When she finds him, she too looks on avidly. And she closes her eyes because she wants to lock the vision of Rama in her heart forever. And here you have a very tender scene where one of her because she shut her eyes, actually she's thinking of Rama, but one of her Sakhis, who knows fully well what Sita is thinking about, says, Sita, meditate on Gauri later. Right now, look at the princess. Another one says loudly so that Rama and Lakshmana can hear, we are late now, but we will come back tomorrow. Same place, same time. Sita is led away by her Sakhis, and she turns back several times to look at Ram, pretending to look for a bird or a deer. She enters the temple. She beseeches the goddess to grant her a husband who will be like somebody like the gentleman she just met. And this is the very famous song which is still today sung at weddings, especially in Mauritius, Jaya Jaya Girivara Raja Kisori, which Sita is supposed to have sung to the goddess at the temple, asking to become the wife of the right man. Then you have the evening where Ram is going to think about Sita, and he's going to compare her to various things. And he first compares her to the moon, and he says, and then changes his mind. And here is why. He says, born of the salty ocean, with poison for a brother, dim by day, with a dark spot in your orb. O moon, how can I compare you to Sita's beauteous countenance? You wax, you wane. You're the curse of lovesick damsels. Rahu devours you. You trouble the Charbaka blood. You wither the lotus. O moon, you have too many faults. We then move on, and everybody's tried to break the bow, nobody's broken it. And Janaka says, is there not one man on earth capable of stringing this bow? Are there no heroes left? Again, Lakshmana is incensed, and he says, my brother can do anything. What are you talking about? And in the meantime, the camera seems to turn and pan on the assembly. And here you have a very interesting character of Sita's mother. Nobody else has imagined a mother for Sita, but Tulsidas does, and she's Sunayana Devi. And she is completely disheartened. And she says, how can this young boy break the bow? Since when have little swans lifted the Mount Mandara? Her maids try to console her. Sita herself is nervous, and she prays to Ganpati and requests him to take the weight of the bow, make it light, and throw the weight on the assembly. The bow is broken successfully, and it makes such a noise that the horses of the sun god, which were crossing the skies, suddenly strayed from their path. When Janaka here, and they say that, when Sita heard the news, the bow was broken, she's going to marry Rama, she stood still as a statue, unaware that Rama was waiting for her garland. She had to be shaken from a trance. Her Sakhis tell her to garland Rama and touch his feet. But Sita refuses, because she said last time he touched a rock, became a woman. If I touch his feet, will I become a rock? I'm not touching any of these feet. Then the other kings object to Rama being given the bride. And once again, Sunayana Devi is very disheartened. And then finally the wedding happens. But before the feast can actually happen, Parashurama enters and he says, who has broken this bow? Before anybody can say anything else, you have this interesting, angry young man, Lakshmana, who's really painted in detail as this angry, impertinent, insolent young man. And when Parashurama says, who broke the bow? He says, sir, I have broken many bows in my childhood. You were never angry then. Why are you angry now? Parashurama thunders, how dare you compare a Shivadhanush to a small bow? All bows are alike, some big, some small. What's the big deal about breaking an old bow? Rama mistook it for an old one. He touched it, it broke. So what? Parashurama is furious. Don't you know who I am? And so on and so forth. And finally, he has to be, Lakshmana has to be controlled by Rama, who says, please don't say anything more. And he says, in all humility, please forgive Lakshmana. And the duel ensues, and whatever is meant to happen, happen. So the bow slips out of Rama's hand. Parashurama completes his avatara, and now the Rama avatara is about to begin. The wedding preparations now start. Sita is dressed up by the goddesses themselves. Rama rides a steed. He doesn't come in a palanquin. In the Bengali Ramayana, he came in a palanquin. Now he rides a steed. Sunaina Devi welcomes him like they still do. At the entrance, she puts the tilak. She does the arti. And a lavish banquet that follows has four types, has dishes that cater to the Shad Ruchi. And there are four types. They are to be swallowed. Some dishes are to be chewed. Some dishes are supposed to be licked first. Others are supposed to be sucked upon. And then the Bidai scene is a tender one. And, even the birds, the mynas and the parrots in the palace cry out for Sita, call out to Vaidehi. And finally, the party sets off with the brides. But what do you have? When you look, you see Janaka following the bride's party. And he has almost reached Ayodhya, walking behind the chariots. And finally, Dasharatha has to get off his chariot and say, either you come and be my guest and please climb into my chariot, or you go back because you've walked all the way from Mithila to Ayodhya, to the frontiers of Ayodhya. And so finally he says, no, I have to go back. And he goes back. The child brides are welcomed. And it is said that these young brides slept in the queen's laps. So this was the last wedding. And if we notice, it was high in drama, charged with energy. It is full of intense moments, but one of the most beautiful moments here are Janaka as a tender father who can't bear to be separated from his daughter, and he follows the Bidai, he follows the Barat, almost till her Sasural. Then it's the character of Sunaina Devi, who is very distressed about her daughter's wedding. But for me personally, the most amazing creation is the angry young man. Before Javed Akhtar imagined Amitabh Bachchan, the angry young man had been imagined by Goswami Tulsidas, who makes him this impertinent man and who doesn't even realize he's talking to Parashurama. He could get into serious trouble, but jawab pe jawab, he just answers away, and the situation gets extremely heated. There is premarital love imagined, and the lovely tender scene with the Sakhis. So these were the four Ramayanas, and I hope you had a good time. It was a fairly hectic run. We went to 4 weddings. We feasted at 4 banquets. The first and the second banquet were fairly light, but we did have a good time with the other 2 were 51 side dishes and pan. So this has been for me a very interesting experience in terms of seeing how each poet imagines the same episode very differently. And that's why I cannot think of an original and a copy, an original and a translation. Each one of them is a special, separate, personal creation. All the 3 are Bhakti Kavyas. All the 3 imagine Ram as God. But how many variations, how many details, how exquisitely each one has been drawn, underlined with such pleasure. So Thank you very much for your very patient hearing. I hope I stuck to my time.
Thank you so much, madam. It was really interesting and it was a beautiful description that you have given. And every one of us, those who are attending the session, they must have felt that this time is really very less. And I would say that we also attended the wedding of Ram and Sita with your description, as if we are witnessing in front of our eyes. Thank you so much for the great description. And if any one of us, I will request all of you, if you want to ask anything, any question, then please raise your hand so that I can unmute you. Yes. Akanksha ji, you can unmute. Yes.
Ma'am, thank you for the beautiful lecture. I just wanted to ask you, could we get some additional references for reading all of these Ramayanas that you mentioned and the other ones by ourselves sometime in detail?
Sure. What I have done is I've worked with the original text and with scholars. For example, I worked with the Gorakhpur edition of the Valmiki. I worked with Dr. Indira Iyer, but you have a very wonderful Sanskrit department. That shouldn't be a problem. For Tamil, there is no good English translation except one which is a sort of retelling, you know. Whereas I, thanks to my mother, Jaya Venkateshan, I was able to go into it verse by verse. There is one book which looks at only the Araniya Kanda, which has been translated. I will send the reference through Supriya Rai. For Bengali, I know that there is, again, a retelling, if you wish, of the Ramayana. But once again, I had the good fortune of working with Philippe Benoit, professor of Bengali at the Sorbonne, and we went through the original text. To the best of my knowledge, there is no word-by-word translation. I hope there will be. And the Tulsis, of course, again, I've used the Gorakhpur edition.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anjali Shukla ji, you can ask.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
I'd like to ask one question that I'm kind of into mythology as well. So I have read the scriptures and text, the text. So I wanted to ask why over the period of time have we, changed the text for our convenience? Like I read the original thing, the Ramayana wala thing, but like the snippets of it basically. So originally it was said that, Ram Bhagwan being a Kshatriya, he used to eat non-veg and everything, but in the recent text it is said that he was pure veg and everything. And also I also had one more question where in the original as in the older versions it is said that Shabri offered him food. It was just said Shabri ne bhojan diya, but over now we just refer to it as Shabri ke bear. So why is that?
See, couple of things. If you look at the Valmiki, Ram enjoys, he's a Kshatriya, right? So his dharma, his jati dharma, allows him to eat meat. So when they are in the forest, they eat venison. There are no two ways about it. What happens is with time, this text becomes a bhakti kavya. And every, because you have the Jain Ramayanas too, huh? So let's not forget it. So it's not a Hindu prerogative. Now, each religion, each social setting adapts this. Like, for example, like I told you, in Valmiki, Sita and Ram, we don't even know whether they looked at each other at the wedding. Whereas, be it Kambaramayanam or the Kritibashi Ramayan or the Tulsidas's Ramcharitmanas, there is a very big place given to premarital love. Okay, when you write a piece, it has to appeal to your audience. And each of these poets and all the poets who write after Valmiki say that, we are going to retell this story in our language. And each of them will use a different example. For instance, you have Kamban who says, I'm like the little proverbial cat, greedy for milk. And what do? I go to this ocean of milk, which is the Valmiki Ramayana, and I with my little tongue. How much will I get? Whatever I get, I'm telling you. So the text will then get adapted to a social milieu. So if right now some groups are imagining Rama to be vegetarian. Why not? Ram is nobody's private property. The Ramayana belongs to every story belongs to the teller. And the listener is free to reinterpret, retell the story as he pleases. That is the rule of storytelling. There is no right and wrong. So that should answer the part for you about the vegetarian thing. And for example, in one of the Jain Ramayanas, Ravan is a great bhakta, you know, and he's going to use his own intestines to play a veena with it. Okay, he's a great bhakta of Shiva, or of whoever that particular religion chooses to make him of. But it is Mandodari and Ravana find a mention in the Ramayana. You look at Kritibash, his Rama wears a topur. How come the Bengali, I suppose he eats fish, I don't know. So there's no mention in the text, but you know, that's how the Bengali poet imagined it. And I think that's the beauty of the Ramayana. As many languages, as many imaginations, as many, the definition of bhakti is personal devotion. So your devotion is different from mine, who's different from the third person's. Long live devotion, long live beauty. Have I answered your question?
Kavita ji, yes, ma'am. Kavita ji, you can ask.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Thank you for a really wonderful lecture. And like someone was saying in the chat, you know, I'm really curious whether you are a dancer, because your expressions were as inviting as, you know, they really, the joy you are taking from your subject is quite infectious. But just coming back to my question, you mentioned that Sita is a Sangam heroine in Kamban's Ramayana.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious because I've come across references that say that the, you know, like Tamil text like Chilapadikaram and Manimekalai show awareness of the Ramayana. Okay,
Yes.
so my question is that in these early texts from a Buddhist world probably, or in Sangam literature, what fragments of the Ramayana exist? Do they exhibit only a awareness of the story, or do we have actual fragments from the epic in these texts?
See, to the best of my knowledge, the stories must have been circulating. The Kamba Ramayanam, the Ramavataram happens only in the 10th, 11th century. But the story must have been circulating. And you find references to episodes, little comparisons, references. Like I told you, in Jain mythology, there's a very clear place for Ravana and Mandodari. Okay, so I think various, because of the popularity of the story and something about the story which is so enchanting, which seems to find a place in everybody's heart, whoever went that way drank a little bit of this water, you know, and imagined it in different situations. If you look at just folk tales of the Ramayana, you'd be amazed. And every time that folk tale will tie it up to some story. You know, we don't have the time today, but in Durgabai Bhagwat has told you about stories among the tribals related to the Ramayana. And they say that when Sita's labor pains started, her back was hurting, but a cow was also in labor. So the cow said, I will hold your back, you know, must be acupressure or whatever, with my 2 horns till you give birth, and then you help me with my babies. Sita said yes. The cow held her, her twins were born. But after that, the cow said, it's time for my baby, help me. And Sita said, I'm a queen, I don't give birth, help cows. And the cow cursed her that you and your progeny will be lying in your own excreta for a year. My progeny will come out on their own. I will always give birth alone, and they will stand on their legs within a few minutes. And that is why women today apparently bear 2 points in their hips like that, and we need to be toilet trained.
Makarand Pandeyji, you can ask. Please unmute yourself, Makarand Pandeyji.
first of all, thank you very much. I really enjoyed, I think, that detailed description. I could vividly imagine in my mind how you were describing all the four Ramayans. I had just 3 questions. This is a fairly basic, but I think the fact is that you've given such detailed explanation. My first question is with regards to, have any of the Ramayans mentioned and given any references to the age or the physical description of Ram and Sita, right? And my last question is that the performance of the actual marriage, was there any description with regards to any details on the actual marriage procedure?
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Great. I'll try to answer from my limited knowledge. They seem to, Ram and Sita, Lakshman, their age is not very clear as to how old were they when they got married. If you tally it all, it doesn't always make sense. As far as the wedding ceremonies go, there seems to be details in the Valmiki. But they are the rituals are described, and like I said, it's all about a Vedic sacrifice, which I suppose is common to all important functions. There is, all of them mention the Nandi Shraddha, but only Kamban mentions the Pani Grahana and the sighting of the Arundhati star. So rituals are mentioned, very much mentioned, but they're very, very culture specific. And the Valmiki Ramayana looks at it as a Vedic sacrifice. That is why it is the very heart of this marriage. We don't know how the young bride and groom were dressed or what they felt or what people ate and so on, but we know everything about this, this altar of the sacrifice, the particular woe concerned, the genealogy of the two families. That is what is given great importance. Right. But about the age, they are not very clear.
Right. What about the physical description? Any physical description is there?
Yes, but they are the canonical beauty. Ram had the forehead like the moon and a face like this.
No. What I meant is that how tall they were, or were they?
No.
That kind of thing.
No, they say that they're Ajanubahu, but it's very canonical. There's nothing that allows you to, and if at all the poet takes the poet seems to say that, for example, Kamban says that Sita's hair had become darker since she saw Rama because she was thinking of him and he was dark as the rain cloud. So aisa kuch hai, but beyond that there is no height, weight ka detail nahi hai.
In the Valmiki Ramayana as well, are there references to, walking around the fire?
Yes, walking around the fire, no. There is no walking around the fire. Actually, we meet the walking around the fire later on. When Sugriv and Ram meet and Hanuman is supposed to seal this friendship. So he says Hanuman lit a fire and they walked 7 steps around the fire, because when you walk 7 steps with somebody, you become a friend for life.
Yeah, because that is the
that
current.
That is where we really.
Correct. That is the current process.
Yeah.
It's just that I thought maybe, the origin came from this wedding.
No, it comes from, actually, very curiously, it is that scene of the, when Ram and Sugriv finally actually get together and they say that, okay, I'll fight for your wife, you fight for mine. At that moment, Hanuman lights a fire and they take 7 steps around the fire. And it is said that he who walks 7 steps with you is your friend for life. So that is they don't sign a document. They walk 7 steps around the fire and Agni is witness. But the number 7 is interesting because, in all cultures, because it's the 3 worlds and the 4 directions. So it comes to that magical number of 7, and you'll find it in all this thing. That is why we get into Sat Janam Ka Rishta, and so on and so forth. 7 is a number we find across cultures.
Yeah, and obviously, sorry, I'll just take 1 minute. In Hindu culture, typically the marriage of the gods and goddesses is performed in a different way than the marriages of humans, right? If I thought maybe in the Valmiki Ramayana or the other Ramayans as well, that process may have been followed.
No, here in the Valmiki Ramayana follows a very austere process. There don't seem to be clear wedding rituals. There are rituals, but they don't seem specific to the wedding. But it's also true that there are no other weddings, so we can't compare and contrast. But all the others are very culture specific, sweetly scented with local language, local customs, local mores, local beliefs. Everything is very, very specific. Somebody said, Kamban describes stalks of the Sarayu, but it's really the Kaveri.
Thank you very much, really.
Thank you.
Sneha Gupta ji, you can unmute and you can ask.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you for such a wonderful session. I always like to read and hear about the Ramayana and Mahabharata both. So, ma'am, I would like to know about, till now I only know about the Valmiki and Tulsi Ramayana, but now I'm getting interested in Kamban and that Bengali Ramayana. So can you please give some reference from online or offline where we can get Hindi or English books for the same, where I can
See,
read?
you can read a retelling of it. I will leave the references with Supriya Rai, but they're only retellings. You know, you don't. You will get interesting details, but the joy of the little images that would, that is somehow left out. That is why, although it's not like I've read all these Ramayans as thoroughly as I would like to, but having read these 4 episodes in the original, the joy is something else.
I can understand, ma'am, but I don't know Tamil. That's why, and even I don't know Bengali.
I know, I can understand. I don't know Bengali either, but I had the good fortune. And, if Supriya agrees, maybe we could have a lecture by this scholar from Paris on the Bengali Ramayana. And he does a comparative study of the Bengali and the Valmiki Ramayana. Is most exciting.
Okay, so there is no chance of getting the translation of this book.
There is an adaptation. I could give you the details thereof, but it's only an adaptation. It's a retelling. It's not.
Okay, ma'am, no issues. At least you can give that, so it would be really a great help.
Sure.
And thank you once again for such a nice.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Yes, Kavita ji, you can ask.
Yeah, thank you. So I just have a comment about the fascinating thing you told us from Durga Bhagavat's text about the Adivasi story.
Yes.
Two things come to mind. One is, when we talk of intersectionality in feminism, okay, because so here is a female cow who feels compassion for another female in labor. And so there is this kind of female solidarity happening. At the same time, there is a hierarchy between human beings and animals, which prevents the Sita from extending the same kind of solidarity to the cow, who is also female. So when we talk of feminism and intersectionality as modern concepts, you find that this kind of consciousness is there in the oldest of Indian literature and even in tribal literature, which we think of as, somewhere lower down the hierarchy and not given to critical thinking. So that's a fascinating story. And the second point that comes to mind, which I've always felt about Bhakti literature, is that in Bhakti, it is so important, this relationship with God is a relationship of, so close that you can critique, you can question, you can argue with, so it is not just devotionalism, it's a bond that goes far beyond that. So that is to me the most important aspect of Bhakti, which actually comes forth in all these different versions of the Ramayana.
Absolutely.
The more they come closer, like you said, the Kritibasis Ramayana is very homely. So you can cast God in your heart's desire, and you can argue and fight. Yeah,
exactly. In this whole concept of the Navavida Bhakti, I always feel 9 are the formal 9 classifications, but jitne bhakt hai, utni bhakti hai. Yes. So each one will, it's like your own baby, right? Like something that belongs yours, it's yours exclusively. तो आप क्या-क्या नहीं करोगे उसके साथ? कभी उसको सजाते हो, तो कभी उसको सुनाते हो, It's entirely your prerogative. And that is why I feel, the greatness of the Ramayana story is its multiplicity.
Absolutely.
As is the greatness of our tradition. What is India is an India that is multiple, that is plural. There is one God, yeah. I don't get it. I myself appeal to different gods whenever the mood takes me. And you think it's a very peaceful relationship I have with him, her, it, whatever. But we are I think great texts which travel time, okay, are texts that tell you that they have adapted. They have found niches for themselves in every culture. They have found a little spot where they have appealed. The moment you sort of bind yourself up in chains and says, this is me and that's how I am, you become completely irrelevant. If Hinduism has stood the test of time, and Hinduism is probably a wrong word, if this Sanatana Dharma, which has existed since ever, it's because it just opened its heart and mind to every possible idea. जो चाहिए था रख लिया, जो नहीं चाहिए था उसका दूसरा accept बना दिया. I think that's the greatness of our culture, and that's what makes us the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb that we have. And tribal literature, I completely agree with you, is one of our richest unexplored sources. Those of you who are here today, if you can just go out and look at one tribal Ramayana, just record one, we'll be doing ourselves a favor.
Thank you, ma'am. Jamna's iPad, you can please unmute yourself and you can ask.
Vidya, that was a wow.
Hi, Jamnanti.
Now
Thank
I want
you.
to do this with some people who couldn't come in. Have you got it on YouTube or wherever else?
Yes, this record.
It's a given that your lecture will go, like I said, wow. Will I be able to get it on YouTube or whatever, somewhere else? Some link if you can give, because there's some people who couldn't make it today. They
Yes,
told me if you can find it, we'd love to listen.
If
Yes,
Supriya
ma'am, we
sends
have-
it to me, I'll send it to you, Auntie.
Yes. No, we are recording this session and afterwards we are going to upload on YouTube. So definitely we will share the link with everyone, those who have registered with us, and
Please.
it will be available to everyone.
Thank you very much. Well done, Vidya.
Thank you, Auntie. Thank you so much.
So, Rudraksha, with your permission, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Huh?
Why my permission is required?
You're
Yes,
the
ma'am.
host.
Definitely.
You're the host. You can silence me. No, just kidding. Vidya, a couple of quick questions. I think when you were talking of Tulsi, you mentioned something about Sita, which is recited even now in Mauritius.
Yeah.
I don't know where Mauritius came into the picture, just sort of grabbed my attention.
Thank you.
Because
Yes.
as Ramayana and being in the field of Buddhist studies, we know it's there in Thailand, Cambodia, its influence in Southeast Asia. So this just seemed the other side, and whether you could just tell us a little bit more about that. And there is somewhere once you had told me about a particular tribal Ramayana. Somebody had narrated to you a story where when Ram comes in the Bharat, they curse him. Do you remember that story?
That's a Bengali, when
they actually shower abuse on him.
I believe that is a tradition in Bihar.
Huh.
This is somebody told me about this tradition. I haven't read about it.
Okay.
They said that when one thing they don't do around the Mithila area, it get their daughter married at the same time as Sita did. They got
really?
Sita married. Sita's their daughter. Yeah. And they say, "Bahut ho gaya. We don't want to get our daughter married at this time." So I believe in some traditions when the Bharat comes, dher sare gali galoch hoti hai. And then, there's Bharat Milap and people go ahead. But this is what I heard happens in parts around Mithila. One thing for sure, they don't get their daughter married at the same time as Sita. No.
If there
And
is
none of
any
their daughters are called
reference to this,
Sitila.
you could shoot in my direction at
Sure.
any point. At any
Sure,
point.
I will.
And
Yeah,
the other one
sure.
about Mauritius.
Mauritius. This is very interesting actually, because I think it was in 2015 I study Mauritian literature, Francophone Mauritian literature. I'm interested in the Indian Ocean and the Caribbean. And I teach this subject. So when they invited me to lecture there, I went to do a reading with Javed Akhtar. And at that time, when they heard that I do this particular lecture, they said, nothing doing, you have to do this lecture for us. And it was at the Mahatma Gandhi Institute, which is the most important institute in Mauritius. It's as important, if not more important, than the university. And I was, literally bamboozled into it. And I didn't understand what could be so hot. Well, I had a full audience. I don't know how many we are today, but that day I had, 200, 250 people, packed hall. And they wouldn't allow me to stop when I came to the Tulsi. The questions kept coming. And when I came to this part where the song is sung, Jaya Jaya Girivara Raj Kisori, Jaya Jaya Girivara Raj Kisori, Jaya Mahesh Mukha Chandra Chakori, Jaya Jaya Girivara. I just started this and 250 people sang with me.
Wow.
And they were able to give me, then they said, Phir wo wala bataiye na, phir ye wala bataiye. I thought the Hindi was amazing. So I said, how come you speak like this? They said, you know what? 150 years ago, when we landed here as coolies to work as indentured labor, we were from the lowest of low castes. We had no means. We were running away from exploitation, from caste, from bonded labor. What did we bring with us? We brought the Tulsi Ramayana. And even today, if you go to the Apravasi Ghat, which is the steps which these first coolies climbed, and they were put in a storehouse and then they were sent away to store plantations, that has been sugarcane plantations, that has been made into a museum. It's called Apravasi Ghat. And for me, whenever I go to Mauritius, I go there to pay my respects. They went as coolies, they built a nation. And they kept their Ramayana going. Till today, they speak exquisite Hindi. Their Bhojpuri is to die for. Our Bhojpuri songs are written in Mauritius, but recorded in Bombay and sold in UP. These are things we don't know about. And they know, they have the Ramayana Institute. They would do anything for the Ramayana and they know their stuff. It's a lecture that went on for 2.5 hours. And I have been told that I have to come back. They have more to discuss. So, I mean, I have to mention Mauritius and the amazing Mauritian people of Indian descent who kept their Tamil, their Telugu, their Bhojpuri, their Hindi alive and nurture it with love, a love that we don't know for our Indian languages anymore. I salute that institute, the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Mauritius.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, madam. It was wonderful, excellent session. And I thank all the participants for joining today's session. Thank you so much. And as I said that this lecture is being recorded and we will definitely upload this lecture on YouTube so that other people, those who could not attend today's session, they can also get the benefit and they can also enjoy and learn a lot from this lecture. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, madam. Thank you all the participants.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vidya.
How many participants were we today? Thank you, Supriya. Thank you, everybody. You were very, very patient, attentive, very indulgent listeners.